People keep asking me what are my thoughts on Doomfist, and I want to give my thoughts on the initial buffs that they gave him and his nerfs. Before I talk about the buffs and the nerfs he got, I'm going to talk about Season 1 Doomfist and my thoughts on that. So in Season 1 Doomfist, everybody was ranking Doom as an F tier hero, but I kind of disagree. I do think he was a bad hero and he was poorly balanced in a way where it didn't make sense, which I'll explain later. The issue with Doomfist was he was way too reliant on Empowered Punch. You had to build Empowered Punch to get value out of Doomfist. Your Slam was an awful ability, your normal punch was an awful ability, your ultimate was useless, and his passive was mid at most. His passive wasn't really an issue for good Doom players. His primary is decent, you just have to be extremely accurate, but that's not the issue. The biggest issue with Tank Doom in Season 1 was if you didn't have Empowered Punch, you were useless. That doesn't mean he wasn't unplayable, that doesn't mean he's an F tier hero. He was actually really good. If you were able to build Empowered Punch, he was a very good hero and you were able to easily win games with him. With the way I play Doomfist, I try to not rely on Empowered Punch. I try to go in with Slam and land my primary fires because that's basically his skill ceiling that they took away. That's the funnest way to play him in my opinion. I hated farming Empowered Punch and going for punch kills. It's extremely boring and it took no skill. But now they said, okay, we're going to buff Doomfist. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. They're going to buff Doomfist. The first thing that they said publicly was that they're going to give him more empowered punches. And I was so confused because giving Doom more empowered punches is not the right move. Doom did not need more empowered punches. He needed more power in his slam and his normal punch and his ultimate and a little bit on his passive. When I first heard that they said that they were going to give him more empowered punches, I immediately went to the devs and I told them, you guys should not give Doom more empowered punches. You need to put more power in his slam, and you also need to bring all his like movement and his text back because like that's almost the funnest part about Doom and they just kind of stripped it away. I'm pretty sure I told him that it was going to be boring to play Doom because he's going to be extremely punch body. Like he already was a punch bot in Season 1 and he's going to be more of a punch bot after his buffs. It's going to be annoying to play against because you're going to get punched all the time. And everything I said to the devs before I knew what the patch notes were ended up actually being true. Let's talk about the buffs. Let's start with the developer comment. The buff to his passive ability will help him stay in the fight longer. Obviously, I agree. I do think his passive did need buffs, but it's not like good Doom players technically needed this buff. It's mainly for the bad Doom players that don't understand how to play the character. They just die instantly. They don't know how to play around cover. They don't know how to cycle his cooldowns properly. You can't just balance Doom just for high elo players only. Like, you need to make them at least playable in low elos as well. So this buff is honestly fine. The changes to Power Block and Meteor Strike are intended to increase the availability of Empowered Rocket Punch. This is already bad. You don't want Doom to have more empowered punches. It's not fun to play against and it's very boring to play because it takes little to no skill to hit these punches. Getting knocked back and punched into a wall and stunned and CC'd all the time is very annoying. And then it said, due to gaining empowered punch more consistently, the stun duration and size are slightly decreased to reduce some of the frustration playing against it. Obviously, if you're going to be giving Doom this many empowered punches in a fight, you do have to nerf the stun duration and size. It makes sense. But that doesn't mean this change right here was a good idea or takes Doom into the right direction in buffing him. Doom does not need more empowered punches. He doesn't need it. He never did. It was already good. They don't need to touch it. And now they shift some of the damage from wall impact to initial impact. So let's look here. So for Rocket Punch, we're shifting some of its damage away from requiring wall impact so that it's more broadly useful regardless of where fights are taken. So this change, I think it's fine. Generally, I would say having wall impact do more damage is better because you kind of have to go for a wall impact more if you want to deal more damage. It just means that Doom has a higher skill floor if he has to go for wall impacts rather than just a normal punch. But I understand why they did this. And also sliders are a big issue with Doomfist, so I mean it just makes sense. So let's check the first change here. Impact damage minimum maximum increased from 15 to 30 to 25 to 50. This is his normal punch. So his normal punch actually did 25 to 30 damage. It did not do 15 to 30. I think this is either a typo or a bug, but it definitely did not do 15 damage for a minimum charged normal punch. It did 25 to 30. They changed it to 25 to 50. I think this is really good. It was needed. His normal punch was almost useless and it was only used for punching enemies back. The wall impact from normal punch reduced from 20 to 40 to 10 to 30. Like I said, it's fine. They buffed normal punch the initial impact, so I mean this is just whatever. This normal punch buff is fine. Empowered rocket punch wall slam duration stun reduced from 0.5 to 1 to 0.25 to 0.75 seconds. This is really bad. This makes empowered punch awful. A minimum charged empowered punch is useless. It's so bad. If you farm power block and you get empowered punch and you don't go for a fully charged punch, empowered punch is useless. 0.75 seconds is way too low for empowered punch. It makes getting a kill extremely difficult and basically nerfs the hero's overall power. As I said earlier in Season 1, the strongest thing about Doomfist was his empowered punch, and that's how you won games and that's how you carry games with Doomfist. And then they nerfed the ability that lets you carry games and win games as Doomfist, but they let you get this ability more often, but it doesn't matter because this ability is not good anymore. It doesn't matter if you get empowered punch more often, it sucks, it's not good. Non-empowered rocket punch now stuns for the minimum 0.25 seconds duration on a wall slam. This is fine, I think this was actually needed. Normal punch felt really bad when you punch somebody into a wall. I don't know why they removed the stun in the first place. DPS Doom used to have this stun. I'm not sure if it was 0.25 seconds though, but yeah, normal punch definitely needed the stun. Empowered rocket punch knockback radius reduced from 4 to 3. Like I said, I understand why they did this change because he gets more empowered punches, but still, this is not the right move for empowered punch. Minimum time for canceling rocket punch reduced from 0.25 to 0.12. So if you don't understand what this changes, sometimes when you're shooting your primary fires and then you charge your punch, you'll accidentally cancel your punch instantly and it'll just go on cooldown because there was 0 delay from canceling your punch. And I kept bringing it up to the devs that they need to add this delay to punch so you don't accidentally cancel your punch all the time. This delay that they added 0.25 was way too long, and I kept telling them like they have to reduce it, it's just way too long. Now they did 0.12 and I think it's fine. I haven't noticed any issues with it yet, and I haven't heard any complaints about it yet. Cooldown reduced from 4 to 3 seconds, that was changed during his rework already. Yeah, they already mentioned that. Power block, cooldown reduced from 8 to 7 seconds. I don't really think that was needed, but I mean it's whatever. Duration increased from 2 to 2.5 seconds. This change is almost useless in a way. I mean it just depends what elo you're in honestly, but like in GM plus elo, this buff, all it does is make you get shot less for 0.5 seconds. Most players in GM won't shoot your block, especially after like a certain time has passed, like 1 second, 1.5 seconds. You being able to block for another 0.5 seconds just means you're gonna get shot less, which I guess you can survive more, but I mean, this is whatever. I think it's fine, and I also think it's a good buff for lower elo players. Minimum damage mitigated to require empowered rocket punch reduced from 90 to 80. I don't think he needs this. All these changes to power block made empowered punch extremely easy to get, but empowered punch wasn't that good anymore because of all the nerfs it got. But because of these changes, Doom became more annoying to play against and extremely boring to play. You punch, you block, you get empowered punch, you punch. Like, it was just so annoying. Like, his cooldown cycle was extremely boring. He was extremely punch body. It took no skill to play, and it was just really boring. Honestly, they should not have changed empowered punch. They should have left it the way it was. Maybe they could have given him a duration increase. Maybe they could have reduced his cooldown, but he did not need to get more empowered punches. That's just really stupid. Meteor Strike now empowers Rocket Punch on landing. This buff would be really good if Empowered Punch was actually good, but this buff is actually useless. It doesn't do anything. Empowered Punch is trash. You're not going to ult on the enemy team because you're going to die usually. If you ult on the enemy team, you're going to get hooked instantly or you're going to get slapped and you're just going to die. It doesn't matter. Enemy slow duration increased from 2 to 3 seconds. This is whatever. This change to Meteor Strike doesn't fix the issue where he uses his Meteor Strike to escape. It's still an awful ultimate. It's useless. It's just bad. They need to rethink this. Temporary health increased from 150 to 200. This is his overhealth that you get from his passive. This is fine. I think he needed it. Temporary health gain per target hit with abilities increased from 30 to 40. I think this is fine-ish. I think it's a bit much, 30 to 40. They did change it to 35 later, which I think is fine now. But overall, this passive buff is fine. So my final thoughts on this Doom buff was actually a nerf to the hero in general. Now you're probably like, how is it a nerf? He just got like 300 buffs. That doesn't matter if he gets 300 buffs, right? They nerfed the strongest thing in his kit, his empowered punch. They just made him live longer. And the way he lived longer was because of this power block change and because of the passive change. But overall, he just became more annoying to play against. He basically exists more in fights, but he does less. And he's just like an Orisa, where she's just really annoying, but you don't really do anything. That's how Doomfist was. But in Season 1, you were able to do things, but you weren't as annoying. Majority of these changes, I think it was actually a nerf to Doomfist. I know it sounds really stupid to say, but his overall power was decreased by a ton, and I genuinely think these changes were a nerf to Doomfist, but I also think all of these changes to block and empowered punch was taking Doom to the wrong direction. They needed to buff Slam here. Now let's talk about his nerfs. The first thing they said about Doomfist when they were on to buff him was he needed more empowered punches in fights. That's literally what they said. I instantly knew that was a bad idea. Let's see what they did here. Cooldown increased from 3 to 4 seconds on Rock Punch. This nerf is actually really bad. It kind of ruins the flow of the hero and increases his downtime, in which he already has way too much downtime for a tank. It's because Doom relies on his abilities too much. Unlike other tanks where they can rely on their primary fires after using their abilities, they could still put pressure on the enemy team. Unlike Doomfist, when you use all your abilities on Doomfist, you have a, like, what are you going to do? Shoot your primary fires? Like, it's not going to do anything. It doesn't really put that much pressure. So this change is actually really bad for Doom. This power block change made Empowered Punch harder to get. I think this change is actually fine, but they didn't buff Empowered Punch back to what it was in Season 1. So this power block nerf, on top of the Empowered Punch nerf, means Empowered Punch is actually worse than what it was in Season 1. The thing that made Doomfist win games in Season 1 is almost non-existent. His Empowered Punch is garbage now. The passive change, this is fine. I don't really care. Like I said, it doesn't really matter, but this might affect lower elo Doom players. Maybe not too much, but if you just play around cover more, this should be fine, honestly. What's really funny about these changes is that they said they wanted Doom to have more empowered punches for his initial buff, and now that he got nerfed, he actually has less normal punches and less empowered punches compared to Season 1. So they unironically made the hero worse than what he was in Season 1. Season 1 Doomfist was stronger than the buffs that he got in Season 2, and he was stronger than the nerfs he got in Season 2. But yeah, that's like my thoughts on Doomfist right now. I don't understand how they can fuck up this bad on this hero when he was nearly perfect in the first beta. He had slow on slam, his empowered punch was good, nobody thought he was OP, he had all of his techs and all of his movements, he was extremely fun to play. Many Doom players actually thought the changes were good and the balance was actually pretty good. Maybe he needed like some passive buffs and a slight block buff, like not too much. But in the first beta, he was actually nearly perfect. And it's crazy how from the beta to now, they buff the wrong things on the hero and nerf the wrong things on the hero as if they have no idea what they're doing with the character. I genuinely feel like the devs are so out of touch with the Doomfist mains and the Doom community, and they don't understand why we like this character and why we play him. But then again, it is Blizzard. I honestly have no faith in the Bounce team anymore. I personally stopped giving them my feedback on Doomfist. I used to give them so much feedback on Doomfist all the time. Like, I literally give them I literally write like essays to the devs. I'm like, hey, this is not how you should balance the character. Like, this is all bad. You should put more power in his slam. You shouldn't be relying on such a gimmicky mechanic with empowered punch and block. Even Overwatch League players were giving their feedback on Doom, and they don't even listen to them. So like, why would they even listen to me? I personally give up on giving them feedback. I don't think they care. I also don't care anymore, so it's whatever. The only feedback I'm going to be giving them on Doomfist is about his techs and his bugs, obviously, but I'm not giving them like balance feedback. Because to me, it feels like they don't give a shit what I say. I feel like I'm just talking to a wall, so it doesn't matter. Now, but I am going to be giving them feedback on his techs because I genuinely think they don't understand that the changes they did to his techs affects all of his techs. Like, it was like a huge domino effect that ruined all of his movement. And I don't think they understand that, and I'm going to definitely give them my feedback on that, and hopefully when they read it, they could see like, oh yeah, maybe this is a bug, and maybe they'll revert his text back to what they were in the beta, because his movement right now is extremely bad. The biggest issue with Doom right now is they're balancing the hero off of his skill floor instead of his skill ceiling. I'm not saying the skill ceiling is the text. I mean, part of it is, but I'm not saying that they need to bring the text back so he can have a skill ceiling. His skill ceiling was slamming in and landing the primary fires and then punching to get out, right? Making him rely on a gimmicky ability like empowered punch was the skill floor of the hero and very boring to play. Punching people into walls and shooting them, that's really boring. It takes no skill. But slamming into the enemy team and landing every single one of your primary fires, that takes skill, and that was the skill ceiling. But then you add on top of the text where you can like juke enemies and maneuver your way through around certain obstacles and geometry and then land all your primary fires. Like, that part also took a ton of skill, and they just stripped that all away. With the way Doom is currently balanced, it honestly feels like a fuck you to all the players that put a shit ton of hours on Doom and play him at a skill ceiling, because they're trying to balance Doom at his skill floor, which makes no sense. Doom is an extremely complicated hero, and many players pick up this hero because he's complicated. He has a lot of mobility, he has a lot of complicated text that you can add into your gameplay and express your individual skill on the hero based on movement alone. alone, and they just stripped all the fun away. And it just stripped like all the reasons to play Doom, because they want little Timmy who put 10 hours on Doomfist to be able to carry games. It shouldn't be like that. You really need to reward the players that dedicate hours and hours on this hero and play the character at the skill ceiling, because that's how you should balance the game. Anyways, that is my current thoughts on Doomfist. They're just taking him in the wrong direction. They have no idea what they're doing. I have no faith anymore. All hope is gone. I'll still be sending the bugs in. With everything I said, you might ask me, what do I think Doomfist needs? Well, I think Doom needs to go back to the way he was in the beta, because his empowered punch was good, but his slam was good. He had all of his techs and his movements. All they have to do is do small buffs on his passive, power block, and ultimate, and I think he'd be a perfect hero from there. Enjoy the rest of the gameplay. Subscribe if you haven't. Check out all my socials in the description. Yeah, that's it. They're dead. Get K, no Suzu. I punched him off. They're gonna C9. Can I C9? No, it was so close. Holy shit.